Welcome to the Workspace Master Class, and I would call this episode 2 because this master class on Workspace is building off of the master class we did 3 months ago, which was the very first one. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to build off of this. We're going to continue to build the workspace from the environment that we had 3 months ago. Now, for those of you who attended last time, thanks a lot for attending and welcome back. For those of you who missed it, it was recorded. So if you haven't watched the recording yet, what we're going to do is we're going to take a very quick look at what we covered before. It might have been good if I told you not to blink as we watched the last hour-and-a-half masterclass in about 10 to 15 seconds. But we did go through a lot, and we're going to do the same thing during this quarter. But let's get back to the real reason why we're here is to keep building out our workspace. But before we get into that, I want to go over one quick update, and that's Sappho. You might have seen that Citrix acquired a company called Sappho. And very quickly what it is, here's my workspace. What Sappho introduces, and this is my artistic ability, it's not that great, but it's a concept of micro apps. So you would have maybe like a notifications item within your workspace. And within there's all these different tasks that are associated with your account, with the different SaaS applications that you might have access to. And Sappho is going to create like micro apps for those type of applications and those type of workflows. So a perfect example is I have a user who requests time off. And I have to launch the SaaS application, launch my browser, connect the SaaS application, log in, find the location in the app, find the user request, and load it, and then approve it. That whole process, it's not difficult, but it takes a couple minutes. And it's really out of my typical workflow that I do every day, the things I have to work on. What Sappho will do is create a micro app for that specific task. So when somebody in my team requests time off, I will see that task item within my workspace, and all I have to do is hit approve. So it's a difference of spending 3-4 minutes on a task versus spending 3 or 4 seconds on a task. Now that's just one example. You can create custom flows, as well as Sappho has this massive list that they've already integrated with. And this list will continue to grow. But with this, there's a lot of different ways you can go ahead and customize and create unique workflows that's aligned with your business. And so that is what micro apps and Sappho is about. It's not there yet. It's not integrated yet because it was just acquired not that long ago. But it's a potential thing in the future of what you might see in Workspace. But now let's get back into building out our workspace environment with what we have available right now. But I first want to start with my workspace. And if we think back, we've all had a workspace. The workspace, the first digital workspace was back in, Windows Program Neighborhood days, like Windows 3.1. And if you think about this workspace, you had everything you needed right here. Everything we're talking about now was all available within Windows 3.1. You had your applications. They were all within that workspace. You had all your content. All your files were on that workspace. And it was on that device. It was on your one PC. Most people didn't have multiple PCs. Most people you have a single PC that's shared across multiple people. But that was the first workspace. So no, I'm not saying we should all go back to Windows 3.1 days, but that is the concept of a workspace. It's not something new, but it's something that we've had for a long time. But now what's changed is that we have multiple devices. Think about how many different devices you have that you're able to access different resources. And those resources are no longer just Windows applications. We're talking Linux apps, SaaS apps, web apps, and mobile apps, local apps, all these different types of apps. And when you go to these different devices, the Amazon Alexa and the Google Home, they're skills, which is just like an app. But again, we're increasing the types of apps that are out there that we have to support within the environment. And then finally, the content. Most of these applications are going to access content, your data, your files. Now, this content always used to be on your endpoint device, but now it could be there, it could be on a network storage drive, or it could be in a cloud storage area. there's Google Drive, there's OneDrive, there's Box, there's Dropbox, there's ShareFile, content collaboration. There's all these different storage areas where you can have this content reside. So the question now becomes, how do I take all these different devices, applications, and content, and how do I build a workspace? Well, technically you already have. Unfortunately, you have multiple workspaces. Each one of the workspaces is physically on every one of those devices. So if you have an iOS device, if you have an iPhone, there's a workspace. And you have a Microsoft Surface tablet, there's another workspace. All of these different workspaces are unique. How you access the applications on those different workspaces is going to be different than if you go to a different device, which is a different workspace. And then how you get all that content accessible from those different devices. Is there security? Do we trust the endpoint device? Do we have an app that works on that endpoint device? How are we going to manage these endpoint devices? All these are the challenges that we now face in a workspace environment just because of the way technology has progressed. So what we're trying to do is, we look at Storefront, and you can think back, the different revisions of Storefront that we've had. We've had Storefront, web interface, Enfuse, program neighborhood. You keep going back, but it was all about, essentially, it's your workspace of Windows applications. And yes, we've expanded that to include Windows desktops as well as Linux apps and desktops, but there's something missing. If you look at this picture of Storefront, think about what is missing. Every day when you work, are these all the applications? Are these all the resources you access? Probably not. We're missing SaaS applications. We're missing web applications. In Storefront, we're also missing local and mobile applications. And finally, we're missing the content. The content is how many people access their applications. So think about that. When you are trying to access a PowerPoint file, or do you go into PowerPoint and the new file and open and navigate to the file, or do you navigate to the file, double click on it, and then PowerPoint opens? Personally, for me, I find the file first and open it that way as opposed to going in the application. So when you look at Storefront as a workspace, there's certain things that are missing that are very important for anyone who's trying to make this all-encompassing workspace. So when we talk about the workspace experience, it's about taking any one of these devices and accessing a workspace experience that will look the same. It will act the same. It will have the same favorites. It will have the same information regardless of the device you are connecting from. And that workspace experience can then access all of the resources you have been assigned. Local and mobile apps, SaaS and web apps, virtual apps and desktops, browser apps, as well as content apps. So from that one workspace, you can use any device and get access to any one of your resources. So the next thing we want to think about when we talk about workspace is how do we build this? And last quarter when we did the master class, we started building out our workspace. We took a couple of the building blocks and showed you how this all gets integrated to start building a workspace. So I just want to, for those of you who didn't attend or forgot, because it has been 3 months, I wanted to just revisit the workspace environment that we had. So first, we have a user who connects to Workspace, and then you have to have a cloud-based service that will give you access to the Workspace experience. So in this instance, we'll go ahead and use the gateway service. So from this, we were able to incorporate our on-prem virtual app and desktop environment using site aggregation, as well as add SaaS and web applications, single sign-on to SaaS and web applications with the gateway service. The next thing we did is we expanded our workspace out to incorporate enhanced security for our SaaS and web applications. And that means we were able to, watermark the applications. We were able to deny access to, downloading the content from those apps, copying, pasting, printing, navigating away from those apps. We also incorporated website filtering. So within those SaaS and web applications, if somebody puts a URL link to like piratebay.org, or something else that's adult-oriented or illegal or something else, we can block that. or we can redirect it to a browser app, to a secure browser, which is a published application running in the cloud that's disposable. So we talked about all these different ways that we're enhancing security to SaaS applications. When we created this environment, we incorporated our virtual apps and desktop environment as well as the access control policies. What we ended up getting was this workspace where we had our applications, our Windows applications, our Windows desktop, and a SaaS application. So this is the environment we're going to build off of. We're going to keep expanding this to include the things that are missing. And those things that are missing are our local and mobile applications, our devices, managed as well as unmanaged devices, and our content. We need to be able to incorporate all of these things into our workspace, into that workspace that we started building 3 months ago. So let's start by talking about local applications. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at how these applications, iOS, Android, Windows applications, how we incorporate that into the user's workspace. So if you think about what a mobile and local application is, and I use these interchangeably, because look at a smartphone. You have a whole slew of personal applications there. And these are the ones that you're doing. It's the standard applications that's coming with the device, but it's also any of the things that you're downloading for personal use, the games or any other type of applications that you're using. When we want to have this device access our company information, chances are we probably should have work apps on the same device. So we have, if you look at it, we're segregating our device out from personal applications as well as work applications, because with the work apps, we probably need to have some control as IT over how those applications are used, over how we secure those applications, because we are accessing company information. But this just isn't for smartphones only. It's also for Windows 10 PCs. So here you have a Windows 10 device, but it's the same thing. You have personal applications on the Windows 10 environment, and you also have work applications. It's the same concept as a smartphone. How do we deliver work apps down to these devices and make sure that we're managing them and securing them appropriately? So with this, we look at the app management capability within our workspace. So we have Workspace app that is going to make a connection to our workspace. When we make this connection, we're going to authenticate with either Active Directory or Azure Active Directory right now. And once that authentication happens, then the workspace experience is going to be able to request a list of resources using the resource feed microservice. And that resource feed microservice then talks to the Endpoint Management service. The Endpoint Management service is going to go ahead and request a list of apps from the App Management microservice. This service is going to look at the delivery groups associated with the user. It's going to look at the device platform and see what's been published, what's available for this combination of user and device. User is going to go ahead and select an application. What's going to happen is Workspace is going to reroute that request to Secure Hub on the endpoint device. Now, if the Secure Hub app hasn't been installed yet, the user is going to be prompted to go ahead and install that, and Workspace app will automatically direct the user to the appropriate store for that device to download and install Secure Hub. Secure Hub will go ahead and enroll the user and refresh the user and device within the Endpoint Management service. And then after that, the Endpoint Management service will then direct Secure Hub to download and install the selected application from the appropriate location, from the appropriate app store. That could be the Apple, the Microsoft, the Google, or even the SaaS applications. Where is that application going to be coming from? That application gets installed on the endpoint device, and if we encapsulate this app within an app container, which we'll talk about later, we can then set different policies to, restrictions, app restrictions on that application. So overall, that's how this whole process fits into the overall user experience, when they go ahead and launch Workspace app. Now, I did mention that the application would be encapsulated within a container. And without a container, what ends up happening on a device is that you have all these different applications. You have your personal applications as well as the work applications. And they're all within the device. So because they're all basic in the same level within the device, they can all access the platform itself, the memory, the storage, the network, and they can access each other. They can talk to each other. They can share information either directly or through the device's memory, storage, and network. So this brings about a lot of issues here, a lot of concerns for most organizations, because do you trust those applications, the personal apps? Do you trust the device? Is it an unlocked device? Is there even a passcode on it? What about the networks that this device is on? How about the storage? Has the storage on the device been encrypted? And what about the communications that's happening on the device? Do we allow them? Should we allow this particular application to run on any Wi-Fi network or only certain ones? So what we want to look at is, how do we protect these applications? And this is about putting the application into a container. And so what ends up happening here is that within the container, we can decide, can these applications talk to each other, and then can they talk outside of the container to local applications? Within that container, we also basically have an encrypted area, a subset of the platform, the memory, the storage, and the network that is completely separate from the rest of the device. So personal applications cannot access the memory and the storage and the network within the container. But the applications within the container can. Of course, they can access the memory and storage and network within that container. So we're building a separation between the work apps as well as the personal applications. So this allows us to do certain things. It allows us to require that there's a passcode for the application. If you don't lock your phone, if you don't have a passcode on your phone, or it's not set up to a certain complexity, we can set that on the application itself. We can say this application can only work on certain networks. We can block the application from running if the device itself is jailbroken. We can set certain versions, talk about app-to-app interactions, network access, device restrictions. So all this, we're able to do this with just putting these applications in the container. So we're not talking about managing the device. If you think about this, this is very important, because when you get to device management, administrators they have a lot of power on the device. Think about remote wiping. I can wipe out everything on your device if you enroll that device. It's my personal device. No way am I allowing my administrator to have that power on my own device. So by looking at the app management capability within Workspace, we can basically say, you can use your own device, but we're going to set policies on the application. We will manage the application. We will manage the data within the application, but we have no ability to manage anything outside of that application. So this is a really powerful and really interesting thing that we're able to do. The challenge with mobile users is that they're not always located within the same confines of the data center. External access to internal resources is hopefully protected by a firewall. Somehow we have to allow these devices through the data center's firewall while also protecting the public internet traffic. So traditionally, we'd use a full VPN, and this would give our users access to the data center. However, there's some problems with this approach. So the first thing is, a full VPN is device level, meaning that every app and every component on that device has access to our internal resources. The second problem is that a full VPN gives users keys to the entire castle. That means this one connection allows the device, and basically every app on that device, to have access to every resource within the internal network. Now, an alternative approach is to replace the full VPN with a micro VPN. First, the micro VPN is app specific. Only those apps granted access to the micro VPN can establish a tunnel. Second, the micro VPN is also resource specific. This means that a certain endpoint app can only access a certain internal resource. Plus, because the micro VPN is app specific, it only needs to get established when the app is running. Once the app closes, the tunnel gets disconnected, and this, especially on mobile devices, helps prevent the battery drain that we typically would see on a battery device when you have a full VPN running. So this VPN will start up and shut down as the application starts up and shuts down automatically. So we have a Tech Insight video on MicroVPN that provides a lot more details on this and the whole configuration, which I'm not going to be doing in this masterclass. But if you want more information on it, take a look at this YouTube site on this Tech Insight video. So now I want to stop now, on the slides and spend some time and talk about, spend some time and actually incorporate endpoint management from an application perspective into the workspace. All right, let's go into our demo environment, and we're connected into the admin console and the Citrix Cloud control plane. Going in the Endpoint Management tab, the first time you go in here, you actually have to set this up. So I've already done this because it takes some time for the backend systems to get set up. But I do want to go through and show you what happens when you configure the site. But like I said, it's already been configured, but we'll still go through the whole wizard process. So in the Endpoint Management service, you go ahead and get started. It's a very simple wizard. It's basically you're just setting up the URL that's going to be used for your environment. And this is going to be based off of the fully qualified domain name, or a domain name in front of the xm.cloud.com. We need to connect our endpoint management environment so it can authenticate, to our Active Directory environment. So I already got this set up to the resource location, so I just go ahead and select that. I had the Cloud Connector downloaded and installed on a couple environments, or a couple virtual machines in my environment in this resource location. So when I do the test connection, it should come back green. And that's pretty much it for doing the initial configuration, set up for the endpoint management, at least for the domain name. Now, the first time you go into endpoint management, there's a wizard to go through to basically install and set up certificates. If you're going to use gateway, set up your Active Directory configuration. A lot of times I like to skip this initial wizard, because if you ever need to go back and modify one of these settings, doing it in the initial wizard doesn't really help because you don't know where to make the modifications at. So I go ahead and skip these and do it manually. So now that we've gone through that initial wizard, basically skipped everything, let's actually now go and configure these initial settings. And the first one's going to be Active Directory. So you go into the configuration area, LDAP, and you just enter in your Active Directory information. So what's really neat about this is that it's pulling this information from the Cloud Connector. So it's all filled in for me. So this makes it really easy to set up. But again, if you need to modify it, this is where it gets modified. So what I want to do now is go through and configure a few different applications. And there's many different types you can use here: MDX, Web, SaaS, Enterprise. We're going to do some of the Citrix productivity applications. So you go to downloadcitrix.com into the endpoint management. We're going to download some of the productivity applications, basically like Secure Mail and Secure Web. Now, when you go in here, it can be I know the first time I did it was a little confusing trying to figure out what all this stuff meant. Someone who's new to endpoint management. So there's different applications that are available here. There's enterprise applications and there's MDX applications. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the differences between them. So I did the MDX. Now we're going to do the enterprise distribution for Secure Mail. And I'm making sure I select the platform I'm interested in. So there's ones for Android, there's ones for iOS. In this, I'm just going to do Android. The MDX applications I downloaded are all zipped because it's all the apps. So I'm going to go ahead and zip that just to make it a little easier. So first, let's let's look at an enterprise application. So first we'll do secure mail as an enterprise app. And we're only concerning ourselves with an Android device. So with Android selected, we upload the file we just downloaded from downloads.citrix.com. And this would be the enterprise distribution. So when this gets uploaded, then it'll give us all the configuration options that we can do for secure mail. So you can see we can set app versions, the minimum and maximum OS versions. And those are the configuration settings we can do. We can set deployment rules and all that, but that's all we can do. We're basically just delivering an application. Now I want to go back and do an MDX application. So remember when I talked about an app container? MDX is an app container. And we're going to see how that doing secure mail as an MDX application for Android compares to secure mail as an enterprise application, not within an MDX container. So we'll go into our MDX applications. These are the ones I unzipped. And we'll go ahead and upload this for Android. So again, we see some of the same settings, but now we have all these different MDX policies. We are going to set an app passcode. Block it if the app is jailbroken. You can set network restrictions, encryption, but we're going to go down and look at the app. We're going to go down and look at the app interactions. So here we're doing copy and paste. We're allowing that only with apps within the container. And also we have different capabilities that we've disabled access to, like the camera and displays and things like that. So we'll do the same thing for secure web. We'll go ahead and add that MDX package in for Android. And again, we'll set similar policies here, app passcode. For the most part, we're just going to leave the default. Assign it to a delivery group. Just delivery group is just a group that you define, and whatever user is a member of that delivery group gets the application. The all users one is just default. So I'm going to make a couple setting changes here just for this demo purpose. So I'm setting the interactivity only being 1 minute instead of 15, so we can see when we require the pin to happen again, based on how long you're idle. We'll also need to enable a passcode authentication because we want to allow a pin, a passcode to be able to authenticate. And then when you do that, you also need to be able to do password caching because this will cache the password and then use the pin to unlock that cache password so it can then authenticate you into the environment. Now that we have those applications configured, let's bring up our mobile device, our Android phone, and see what happens when we connect back into Workspace now that the user is a member of that delivery group that should get secure mail and secure web. So we're going to go ahead and log on to our Workspace store, and these are the applications that we've used before during the last masterclass. But now we can look in apps and all apps. There's going to be a few new ones down here. And these are the mobile apps, Secure Mail and Secure Web. So we select Secure Mail, but we don't have Secure Hub in it on this machine, on this device yet. So Workspace app is telling us if you want this application, because it is secured with an MDX container, you have to have Secure Hub right now. So we go ahead and hit accept. It sends us out to Google Play Store, and we go ahead and download the application onto the mobile device. Secure Hub then authenticates to the Endpoint Management service, and this is how we're going to get the different policies and the different applications that are going to be sent from the Endpoint Management service to our mobile device. So I'm opening it, I'm signing in, and I'm allowing it access. The reason why we can't see it is because the policies we have in place are blocking this. So I've gone ahead and enabled. I've enabled the screen sharing. So I'm deleting the account so you can see what it's actually doing. The first time I couldn't show the screen. So here it's connecting to my cloud instance, snpp.xm.cloud.com, and I told it not to enroll. Now, because I enabled the PIN setting, I have to give it, the Citrix PIN, for passcode authentication for the environment. And this is important because since we don't have device management, we're only managing the apps, we can't force the user to set a PIN on the device. So we're setting PIN access to the actual application. And that was require app PIN or app passcode. So we'll go ahead now, go back in and download Secure Mail. We'll also download Secure Web. And when these get downloaded, like I said, they get placed into that MDX container. That container, the policies get applied to that container from Secure Hub, which sets all those different policies that we defined within the Endpoint Management Console when we publish these applications. With the apps downloaded, we can go ahead and launch these mobile apps. But you can't see the screen. This would be one of the policies we applied. It's a good security practice, but when you're trying to do a demo and show, when I'm trying to show you what's on my screen, this makes it a little difficult. So we need to go back into the configuration for these applications. So we're going to Secure Mail, and we're going to ease the restriction a little bit, change the policy a little bit for this device, just so I'll be able to share the screen so you can see what's happening. So this will be in the device restriction area, and so right now I've blocked screen capture. So that's, if you try to take a screenshot of your mobile device, that'd be blocked, and it's also blocking me trying to display this onto the screen. So now that I've done that, I go back in and try to relaunch the app, and it says, hey, there's new security policies. You got to restart the application. So I go ahead and do that, and this time, when I start Secure Mail, you should be able to see. You should be able to see the content. You should be able to see what's on the screen. Now this PIN, to unlock it, because I've been idle for long enough when changing that policy, so the application locked out. So I need the PIN to unlock it, and that's one of the app policies we set up. So I got a couple emails here, just any typical email that you get. But now I want to show you is the other aspect of these containers. So I click on the link, and it opens up the link in Secure Web. If I go ahead and copy this URL, I'm going to try to paste it in the browser that's native to my Android device, and I can't. It doesn't even give me the option because the container is blocking copy and pasting to and from, going outside of the container. But if I stay within that MDX container, I can still use the copy and paste. So here I'm in Secure Mail, and I can do the paste. But when I was on the native application that's outside of the container, I could no longer do the copy and paste. So it's just the security around those containers that we use in a mobile environment. Okay, so let's recap what we just did here. So we've expanded our workspace to include endpoint management, delivering local as well as mobile applications. And by doing this, we're able to do app restriction policies, micro VPN, and there's a lot of other things that it supports, but we didn't cover in this particular masterclass, which we will later. But we're now able to manage local and mobile applications to our endpoint devices, and whether those devices are a managed or an unmanaged device is irrelevant at this point because we can handle either case. So where do we go from here? Is now we look at the endpoints. So we've delivered applications to the endpoints, but what about managing the endpoints? Now, we're not going to manage every endpoint because, like what I talked about before was that, do we really want our IT team to manage personal devices? So there's a whole concept of managed devices as well as unmanaged devices, and what we're really focusing on are the managed devices. How do we have our workspace manage those devices. And so think about this. We have our personal device and we have our work device. So this is now device level management. We don't want to touch the personal devices. We want to focus our attention on these work devices. Now, if you look at this, the personal device has those work applications on their workspace, secure web, secure mail. We manage those with the endpoint management service that we just talked about. And we did the same thing on our work device. Now, what we want to do is we want to look at managing the entire device, only the work device. So when we look at device management, what we end up seeing is that we have, when a user connects to Workspace, it talks to the resource feed microservice after you've authenticated, and it talks to the endpoint management service. Part of that, of the endpoint management service deciding, what you have access to, is it's going to identify not only the user but the type of device you're using. And when we access the environment, the endpoint management service is going to identify this. It's like, this is a new device. And if it is, it's going to basically ask the user if this device should be managed. Do you want to enroll in device management? And then when you do, the device will go ahead and enroll with the endpoint management service, which will then apply a different sets of policies based on what we configured. So it'll, using different microservices within the environment, it's going to assign and configure the device as appropriate. It can set different networks for that device. It can set different optimizations for like CPU, memory, and disk for the device. Or it can set just general device policies, like how is it going to be updated, what type of security should the device have. A lot of different settings will be able to apply at the device level. So this is at the device level, whereas before we were at the app level that was sitting on top of the device. So you either manage the device, you manage the app on top of the device, or you can manage both. So that's a very quick intro on endpoint management devices. So now let's go back to our environment and take a look at and see how we would create certain policies and start managing some of our devices. All right, now that we're back into our environment, we're going to configure some new device policies, because we're going to be focusing on the device management as opposed to the app management. So we'll quickly filter our available devices based on the Windows desktop, and an easy one to do is Windows Defender. We want to make sure that if we're managing these desktops, we want to make sure that we're looking for antiviruses. We're doing malware detection. So if you're not using Defender, you should have something else. But in this case, we'll configure Windows Defender since it's part of the operating system. So here we're going to pretty much leave everything enabled, except we're going to disable the ability for the user to access the Defender UI. We really don't want users to shut down Defender on these managed devices, so we're going to take that capability away from them. We also want to go through and configure the Windows updates. How are we going to get updates from Microsoft? When are we going to get the updates? Are we going to delay the updates? Do users have the power to, automatically install the updates or delay the updates? So we'll go in and set the active hours. We'll set whether we're going to include only Windows as part of the Windows update, but other Microsoft products, as part of the update. Plus a few other settings for the update configuration. Now we're using Windows Update here, the service that's provided by Microsoft. You can also configure this so you use your own Windows Update server. So if you have Windows Update server running in your internal environment, you can go ahead and configure that as well, and the updates will be coming from that instead of the Microsoft public service. It's like before, we finish it, we make sure we apply it to the delivery group. Now let's create one more device policy, and this is going to be on just general restrictions on the Windows operating system. What capabilities within Windows can a user have access to on a managed device? Do we want them to have access to everything, or should we limit some of the capabilities? So one of the first things you probably want to shut down is internet sharing. You probably don't want to share your internet connection with other people unless you've approved it. Also, the auto connect to Wi-Fi hotspots. Usually a good idea to make sure the user knows what they're connecting to. Plus, if this is a managed device, it's probably internal only. So you don't want that thing taken out and using other hotspots. Allow use of the camera. Go ahead and disable that. Especially if you're not using video conferencing or anything, want to make sure that the camera isn't compromised and people are using it. And there's a bunch of other settings you can make. As I scroll through, you can see these things. But we'll just make those changes and apply it just like everything else to our delivery group. Now, the next thing I want to look at is deploying an application. So we already did this. We did this with app management. We did this on my Android phone. But I want to show you how this is different for a managed device, a device that we're going to manage. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to do a very common application that most of us are probably using is Google Chrome. So we need to go ahead and get an enterprise install version of Google Chrome. Now, just like before, we'll go ahead and hit add, except this time instead of MDX, we're going to do enterprise. This is just an enterprise application, just a standard install, not one of these modern applications coming from a store. It's just an app that we've downloaded. So for Windows desktops, these can be PowerShell scripts, they can be MSI files, they can be AppX files. But luckily for us, Google Chrome is an MSI file, so this will make it fairly easy for us to configure. Okay, now that the file has been uploaded, there's a couple required settings that we have to include with this. And the easiest way to get these is with the Microsoft tool Orca. So this will allow us to look at an MSI file. So we'll go ahead and load the MSI file associated with the Google Chrome installer, and this will be able to give us the information that we need. So there's a lot of different properties and settings we can see, but we really want to just focus in the section for properties. The first thing we need is the product name. And of course you would think it's Google Chrome, in this case it is. But you want to make sure it's what's actually in the MSI file. For description, you can put anything you want. We need the product version. We need the actual version, the full version that's in the MSI file, or that's associated with the MSI file, as well as the product code. Once those have been added, we can go ahead and hit next and continue with the wizard. Actually, the product code, so what I copied out of Orca, had the brackets on there. I believe I just need to remove those, and it should work now. Yep. And again, we apply this to the delivery group. But what we want to do is actually have Google Chrome be automatically deployed. We don't, this is let's say it's a required application. So right now, when we added it as part of the wizard, it became an optional app. But we want this to be required, so we remove it from the optional and add it to required. So now, Chrome should automatically get deployed to the endpoint device. So let's go ahead and log in to a new Windows 10 device, and we're going to go ahead and roll into Endpoint Management. So I'm going to go ahead and do a manual enrollment, and it's pretty much just going into the accounts section of the Windows settings, and then I can do access, work, and school. So right now you can see I'm only connected to my Active Directory domain. Now when I enroll in the device management, this device will also be enrolled into my Endpoint Management service. So the first thing, just give it an email address of the user that's using this endpoint. And of course, it wasn't able to find that because I don't have that aspect set up. But so I'm going to give it the URL for my endpoint management service running in Citrus Cloud. So it's connecting the service. Once it connects, it's going to ask me for the password for this particular user. This is my domain password that I've been using for the entire demo. And this is now going to go ahead and enroll this device within the endpoint management service. So as soon as this device gets enrolled, all of the policies and all of the settings I've applied are being sent down to this device. So we had Google Chrome set to a required application. So once this device is enrolled, Google Chrome as well as the other policies are being delivered down to the endpoint device, and it might take some time for Google to get downloaded as well as installed, but we should see it appear on our desktop once the deployment gets completed. Okay, so it looks like Google Chrome is now available. So all we had to do is enroll, and we got an application. So we could do this with any MSI application. A PowerShell could also deploy other apps for us as well, and then we can control deployment of different applications with the endpoint management service on our managed devices. Also want to show you, the different policy, some of the different policies. So we set Windows Update policies, and in here you can see the policies that have been set, and they're all coming from a mobile device management. And this is, this is the endpoint management service that we configured for OS updates. So I'm going to go back into the admin console now, and quickly you can see that an Android device has been registered. We have a Windows desktop device that's been added. But I want to show you what, as an admin, you can do to a device that's been enrolled. So I'm going to go into to my managed Windows 10 device, and I'm going to do a full wipe. Let's say this device was stolen, and I have no access to it anymore. I don't know what happened, so I'm going to completely wipe the device. And I need to quickly go over to the VM that I did this to. And what you'll be able to see is it starts shutting down. Okay, so now I won't be able to see it. So now I'm going to load up Zen Center so we can look at the hypervisor, because this is a VM. And you're going to see what's happening to this Windows 10 device since I did the full wipe. So it's shut down, it's rebooting, and on the next load, on this load, what's going to happen is it's resetting the entire device back to the original deployment. So any data, any applications, anything that I've configured on the device are being removed and wiped, and that device is being reset to basically a factory default. Now, this process takes some time. It's basically installing the operating system again, so we're not going to complete this part of the demo. We'll also be sitting here watching this percentage go up very slowly. Okay, so let's now recap what we did. Now we've got the endpoint management service not only managing local and mobile applications, but it's also now managing our devices. So the next step in this is to look at our content. How do we incorporate our content into this overall workspace architecture? So first, why? Why do we care about content collaboration? So first, it's about the experience. How are you accessing these different devices? What type of devices are you using? How do we handle content on these different devices? Is it a virtual device? Is it persistent, non-persistent? Is it physical? Is it mobile? How do we handle content on these devices so it's optimized and the user gets a good experience on it? The next thing we have to concern ourselves with is the choice. There's a lot of choices on where your content lives. And chances are it's not going to live in a single place. You're going to have content all over the place. So the choice is you can either force your users to dump all the content in one location so they have a good experience, or we allow the users to have their content in multiple locations and we incorporate a good user experience into the content collaboration solution. And when we look at the experience, not only do we look at the type of device, but we also look at where the data lives, where this content lives. And the final thing is security. What should a user be allowed to do with the content? And by user, I'm not necessarily saying the user who created the content or who's the owner of the content, but someone the user sent that content to, maybe for feedback or just to review it. Should the user be allowed to view it or edit it based on the device they're on? Should the admin or the user have the power to remove that content from devices or watermark the content so that if the document gets printed, we can see the username of the person who printed the document. So there's a paper trail of who's printing something that shouldn't be printing it. And there's also, it really comes down to overall how are we securing the content for these different types of devices, for these different types of storage locations that the content might be living in. So there's a lot to consider when we look at content collaboration, in addition to just getting access to the content. So this is why this becomes a very big and important piece in our workspace. So when we look at the overall architecture, and we go back here and let's walk through the user experience. So device starts up, Workspace app, user launches Workspace app, connects to Workspace, and you authenticate. Now Workspace app, just like before, talks to the resource feed microservice, realize that, hey, you are assigned content collaboration. Now the Workspace app has an engine that can talk to the content collaboration service that gives us access to our files. So the Workspace app and the content collaboration service talk to each other to get access to this information. Now, to do a lot of this customization, the security and the choices that the users have, we use a set of microservices that the content collaboration service uses. So let's simplify this diagram. Let's dive a little bit deeper into each one of these little microservices. So the first one is the connector microservice. So this is all about accessing content from all the different locations. So with Share Connect, we can go ahead and set up so that when you have this configured, if you have content on your PC, in the office, at your desk, or at home, with the Share Connect connector, we can allow a user to access that storage regardless of the device and the location the user's at. So it's giving you remote access to the storage through the content collaboration service for a local PC. The next part of this is what we call storage zones, and this would be network file servers. So you might have network file servers within your data center, and we can make it really easy for users to get access to that content remotely on any endpoint device via the Workspace app and the content collaboration service. And then the final aspect are all the cloud providers that are out there. Users have access to more than one. I think I have 4 different cloud storage providers. And we integrate all this into our content collaboration service within Workspace app. So again, regardless of the device, regardless of where your content lives, the experience is the same. Now, the content viewer microservice is all about can we view or can we edit the content? And so with users who have read-only access, we have viewers that are integrated that can look at Word documents, Excel documents, PowerPoint, Visio, videos, I forget what else, but there's a list of different forms of content that users can see in a read-only format. Now, if the user needs to edit something, these capabilities have been integrated too, and how this works, the options that the user has when they need to edit a file is based on where does that content live. Now, if that content is living in a cloud storage provider, that content can then be edited either via an Office 365 subscription, via the endpoint, assuming you have the application installed on the endpoint. So if you click on a PowerPoint file that's located in Box, it can open up on the endpoint if you have PowerPoint installed on the endpoint. It can also open within a virtual apps session. So, we used to call XenApp the virtual app. So maybe you have access to a published application for Microsoft PowerPoint. So then you could also access the application from there as well. Now, if the content is located in a storage zone, an on-prem storage zone, you can still access it locally on the endpoint. You can still access it as a published application. But because of firewall settings and even regulatory compliance, it doesn't do the Office 365. But what you can do is have an Office web app server installed within your data center, and that'll give you that functionality to be able to access, via a web-based interface for a user to edit that piece of content. The next piece we want to talk about is the collaboration microservice. So this is basically going to give the user workflows to do many common tasks that we do right now via email. So think about how many times have you sent a document out to a distribution list and it's like, hey, can you provide me feedback? And then what you end up having is you send out to 10 people, you get maybe 5 or 6 emails back, and each one has different comments within it, and only those people who are providing feedback, they can't see anyone else's content. And then you have to remember, think about, did I save all those emails with all that feedback, and have I incorporated all of it into one final document? And who sent me feedback and who did not? Who do I need to follow up with? Or maybe you finish the document and now you need to be approved by a set of stakeholders. So again, you send this out via email. Who has responded? Did you miss any of the emails? Have they responded by a certain date? Have they even opened the document? Have they even looked at it? Are they even aware of it? So it's a common thing that users often do within email. There's also requests. I don't know how many times we see emails, people asking, hey, anyone have any ideas, any projects for the next quarter, any features that we should be doing, any way we should enhance this application. So there's always people are sending out requests via email. And again, as the person who sent that request out, how are you gathering all those replies? How are you consolidating it into a single request document? And then finally, there's custom workflows. Maybe you're trying to do like a very quick one-question survey that you want to send out, and you want to send out to people and have people respond to it. There's lots of different things you can do on the workflows from a custom perspective. But the 3 main ones that we typically see, which is why those have already been built in, is I want feedback on this document, I need approval from my stakeholders on this piece of content, or does anyone have any requests, any projects, any features, anything that we should be looking at. So one of the main design considerations when it comes to content collaboration deals with a non-persistent environment like VDI, virtual desktops or virtual apps. And with my background, this was always a big deal. So if you think about what happens in a lot of these cloud storage solutions that are out there, they believe that most users are using the same PC every day, that PC is not getting blown away after each session. I mean that's kind of crazy if you think about it, but that's one of the main concepts of non-persistent VDI, is that I use the session, I'm done, that machine goes away, next day I get a brand new machine that runs just as fast as day one. So this is really hard for cloud storage solutions that are out there. What ends up happening is that user logs in, and then all of the storage gets synchronized to the local VDI, the non-persistent desktop. And this could be fairly fast depending on your network, how fast your network is, into your internet connection to the cloud provider. Especially if you only have a couple files. But what if you have gigabytes of data? That gets copied down, and then the session's done, user logs off, all that goes away, they log back in, and this whole process happens again and again and again. The user, out of all that content that they have stored in those repositories, I bet they're not even using 1% of it. They haven't, and every day they're probably accessing a fraction of a percent of the content that they're storing in their different repositories. So why should we be copying all this stuff down? And there has been some intelligence people have added. It's like, I am going to have the user select which folders get synchronized. So that helps a little bit. But again, even if you're selecting certain folders, the users have to be educated to select those folders. They have to be educated to deselect them when they're not using that content anymore, or else they, instead of having one folder, they start synchronizing 100 folders because it just keeps expanding as they work on more projects. So there's a smarter way of doing this. I always thought it was more of like an on-demand sync. And what ends up happening here is all your content's living out there in the cloud somewhere. User logs into a non-persistent desktop. They see all of the content. It's not real. It's like a virtual content. And that's why it's grayed out, because they can see the entire structure, but it's not actually there yet. It's just a representation of the content that's actually living in these repositories. So if I click on the image file, that file gets synchronized down, it gets copied down to my local storage, and then when it's copied down, my desktop can then go ahead and launch it. And then when you're done, when you made your changes and you save them, that content then gets synchronized back up to the cloud. So this is more of an on-demand sync based on the content that the user is using, because like I said, most users are using a fraction of a percent of all the content they're storing. So why are we synchronizing everything or even a portion of it down? Let's only copy down the content that a user needs at that time. And that's really important for a non-persistent environment like virtual apps and virtual desktops. So let's take a look at content collaboration. Let's go through our workspace environment that we've been building, and let's see how we configure it. And let's take a look at the user experience from different devices, including a virtual desktop. Now that we're back in our admin console within Citrix Cloud, we'll go into the content collaboration tile. Since this is a new service, we need to add our user accounts so they'll be able to have access to their Citrix files storage repository. So go ahead and identify the email address, and we'll give the user a password. It's optional. So this would be using a SAML authentication, from the workspace, from the user's workspace. But then if the user wants to actually log into the website, they'll need the password. So we'll go ahead and create one. We then define the user settings, what rights they have. For here, we'll pretty much just keep the default. It's going to be good enough for this example. And the storage location is going to be, based on where we have our content collaboration set up in Azure. And pretty much we're done. We go ahead and create and configure this environment for the user and assign everything to them. Now that the user's created, we'll go back to the user experience. We'll refresh their Workspace app, and we should see a new item on the left for files. So within here, we can see favorite files, our personal folder, share connect. But there's nothing in there because we haven't uploaded anything yet. This is a brand new user. So we can either browse files and add them, manually one by one. You can create your folder structure if you want. There's also a tool available that a user could execute. So we'll go ahead and download this and install it. And it's basically going to let the user to select all of their files that they want, and it will then upload them into their Citrix file storage repository with the same folder structure that they currently have. So when you use the Citrix Files migration tool, you do have to sign in as the user account. It needs to know whose account these files belong to. So once we sign in, the wizard's going to guide us through to identify the files that we want to upload. So we first select the directory and all the folders in there, and then we select where we want the destination to be. A typical copy process. You can schedule these if you want to happen after hours, or you just go ahead and say start now. So this is going to go through and start uploading files. We're not going to wait for this whole thing to happen because it will take some time. But this all kind of happens in the background, and as these folders get added into the repository, we'll be able to access them directly from the Workspace app. Once the uploading begins, we can go ahead and refresh inside Workspace app, and whichever files have been uploaded, we'll be able to see those within the Files tab within Workspace app. So now this is what really becomes really good about this new workspace, is that users don't have to change their workflow. So if you launch files, if you launch an application based on executing or double clicking on a piece of content, we can do the same thing here, all within Workspace app. So first, when you select it, it's basically going to give you the read-only view. So it's very easy to quickly see what's in the file. And then you can either download it, you can get a link if you need to share it. There's lots of different things you can do right from this screen. But if we go ahead and edit this, I actually have this account tied in with Office 365, so it's accessing PowerPoint online for me to edit this. Like I said before, if you don't have Office 365, because this app is coming from a cloud-hosted repository, it could potentially load PowerPoint locally, or it could load PowerPoint as a virtual app running on a server within the environment as well. So we'll go ahead and just make a very simple change in this deck and save it. And we're going to show you one of the nice things is it's just integrated file versioning. So many times we're used to, you create a file, you start working on it, and then you make major changes, so then you save it as like Rev1, and then you have Rev2. Next thing you know, you got like 20 files in a directory, and it's all the same one, but it's different revisions. With content collaboration, it's putting revisions on that one file. So now you don't have to have 20 files in one directory. You have one file, and then within Workspace app, you can look at the different revisions that are assigned to this piece of content, and then you can revert back to it as you see fit if you need to. So for many people that have large content repositories, it's always a good idea, to favorite the items that you're currently working on, and your favorites will change, the things you currently work on. But you think about it, over the course of like a week or two, or a couple weeks, even a month, you might be working on the same piece of content over and over again. So if you go ahead and favorite that, it will show up on the home screen of Workspace app, and then once you're done with that project, you just unfavorite it and favorite the item for the next project. So it makes it really easy to access your pieces of content without having to navigate a massive tree structure. So this now starts getting into some of the other concepts within content collaboration, is being able to share content without sending large 100 megabyte files through email. We can simply just right-click one of these files and select share, and we'll get a link. So we can get a link and email that link to somebody, or just message them like in Slack, or we can use content collaboration to email the person a link, and they can then access that link to get to the file. So again, this helps overcome sending massive files through email. We just send links. Now what I want to show is how this works in a virtual app or desktop environment. So far what I've been showing is like within Workspace app. But when you're in a virtual app and desktop environment, chances are it's a full desktop, all your applications are there. You're going to be working within that virtual desktop. So we want to access these files directly. So I've already got the Citrix Files application installed within my master image, and I have my full directory structure, and there's little icons on there that basically is saying these files don't exist locally, they're virtual. It's just a representation, and when I double click the file, it's copied down from my cloud repository and then synced down to my local virtual desktop, and then I'm able to access it directly. So just like Workspace app, where you can share the files or share the content to other people, you can do the same thing within a virtual desktop with the Citrix Files app installed. We can go ahead and share by email or share by a link. We can get the details of the file and history of the file as well, all from within the Explore context menu. You can also, we talked about the workflows. We can also do some of the standard workflows directly from Explore. Do approvals or get feedback for certain documents and send those out to certain people within the organization. So that was a virtual app and desktop, but now what about mobile devices? So we're going to go back into Endpoint Management, and we'll go ahead and add a new application that we're going to deliver out to our mobile device. So we'll do an MDX application for Citrix files. Now this actually becomes kind of important of doing an MDX file or doing an MDX container because we do want to have administrators to be able to control the data. Especially with Citrix files, because we're talking about a lot of content that could be available to those mobile devices, especially if a mobile device, it's not a corporate-owned device. If this gets lost, if we're stolen, we want to make sure that we're able to remove that data from Citrix files. So by being able to deliver Citrix files as an MDX in an MDX container, we'll be able to do like a selective wipe. So if that device gets lost, an administrator can go in and selectively wipe all the content from this application, from those endpoint devices. But once we had it deployed, we go back to the user. We look at the Android phone, and now within the workspace you can see we have the files have been integrated into it. We can access. You can see that content, but in order to access it, it's going to now tell us, hey, you need to download Citrix files from the store. It's going to dump us out into the Google Play Store, the Apple Store, for us to go ahead and download this application, and then we can directly access these applications, or then we can directly access this content. All right, so let's go back, and where are we now with our whole environment? So we've now incorporated content collaboration into our workspace. So this brings us, the question is, where do we go from here? And so we're going to look at this diagram again, and there's more things we can do. We can, for instance, right now we're only using Active Directory, to get access to our workspace. And I have mentioned Azure Active Directory, and there's going to be always lots of questions on two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication. So we can take a look at the identity aspect within the workspace. Within virtual apps and desktops, with the content collaboration we showed, adding in Citrix files capability into our master image, but let's talk about user layers. A new capability that's available in the virtual apps and desktop environment. With endpoint management, I briefly talked about managing applications as well as managing a device. There's a lot more we can go into on each of the different hardware platforms. I think one of the more interesting ones, because it's fairly new, is to look at Windows 10 management. How do we manage Windows 10 endpoint devices with the endpoint management service? And then finally, I talked about the connectors, with the connector microservice as part of content collaboration. Let's actually start configuring some of these things. Let's configure the user for Dropbox, OneDrive, Box, Google Drive, and look at how this all gets configured, as well as the overall process of how this is managed from the content collaboration service. Now, of course, we don't have time to talk about this, and this is what I'm thinking about for Q1 2019 for the next Workspace Master Class. Now, I do have to say, topics are subject to change because there could be something much more interesting than these, although I think these are quite interesting in themselves. But this is what we're thinking of for the first quarter of 2019 for the next Master Class, which, pretty much going to call episode 3, because we're going to keep building out this workspace to make it, incorporate all the functionality that many of us are going to need within our workspace environment. So with that, thank you for attending again. If this is, if you watched the first one and you're here for the second one, thank you for attending. If this is the first one, you missed episode 1, go back. It's on YouTube. It's on the Citrix site. You can access it and see how we did SaaS applications as well as site aggregation for virtual apps and desktops. And I really hope to see many of you back here on the Q1 2019 Masterclass. And with that, I think I have a little bit of time left to take a few questions. And what I don't, I'll take the rest of the questions that I'm able to answer, that other people can answer within Citrix, and I'll put that in a blog out there for us that we'll be able to, if you ask the question, hopefully it'll be incorporated in that future blog.
All right, so thank you for attending, like I said before, and give me a moment while I open up the Q&A section of the tool that we're using. And let me go through the list real quick and see which ones I can answer. So the first question is, can you upgrade from XenApp 7.16 to Workspace version, or do you have to go other versions? So they're independent. So you can think of Workspace as the next. No, I don't want to say it's the next version of Storefront. It's Workspace is an alternative to Storefront. So Storefront is giving you access to virtual apps and desktop, XenApp and XenDesktop, for really any version, 7.16, 17, 18, even before that. You can go back to the XenApp 6.5. Workspace is the alternative because not only does the virtual apps and desktops, but it also does the SaaS applications like we went over in the last master class, and it also incorporates mobile apps and the content that we went over in this master class. So it's an alternative to Storefront. And this actually goes to the next question, is how do we build this Workspace on-prem? Unfortunately, right now you can't. Workspace is a cloud-only offering or service right now. Whether there will be an on-prem in the future, I don't know. And even if I did know, I wouldn't be able to say one way or the other, but I don't know. Right now, it is a cloud-only solution, which then moves into the next question of how do you get Workspace? So you actually don't. So the Citrix Cloud has a bunch of different services, and you subscribe to those services. It's pay per user per month or something like that, and you get access to that service. It could be the endpoint management, it could be the content, could be SaaS applications, and what have you. Those services give you access to the Workspace experience. So you actually can't subscribe to the Workspace experience, but you subscribe to other services within the Citrix Cloud that gives you access to Workspace. Hopefully that makes sense. So then the question usually comes down to is like, well, which service do I have to subscribe to? And it's really any of them. What a lot of people have been looking at is what's the cheapest one? What's the cheapest way for me to get the Workspace? And that actually comes down to be the gateway service. And the gateway service just means that you don't have to have a gateway in your on-prem environment in your DMZ anymore. You don't have to set up, manage the networking device. You don't have to have an IP, a public IP for that gateway device. With using a gateway service in the cloud, you get over all that complexity, especially for the Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops admin. That's one of the challenges. As someone who used to be a Virtual Apps and Desktop admin, although it was MetaFrame, we had to engage with the networking team to get a gateway implemented, and it's a challenge, opening up firewall ports and getting new networking devices out there that the networking team manages. By going down the gateway service route, you get beyond that. You don't have to deal with the complexity of that on-prem, and working with the networking team, because that would all be managed by Citrix. So the gateway service is actually the cheapest way to get the Workspace experience. Let's see, is there a way to install applications automatically so you don't need to open like the Google Play and click install? So this goes to the endpoint management. So what you did see is that for the Windows 10 device, I was able to have Google Chrome deployed automatically. So that was an enterprise app, and that was a Windows 10 device that was enrolled in the device management aspect of endpoint management. When I was demoing the Android device, the phone, that device was not enrolled in device management. It was enrolled in the app management aspect of endpoint management. So it gets a little confusing with some of the names there. So Citrix Endpoint Management, as I went over, part of it was application management, and the other part was the device management. So if the device is enrolled in only the app management, then no, you can't force these automatically force these applications to be installed on those devices. But if my Android device would have been enrolled in the device management portion of Citrix Endpoint Management, then I could have done the auto deployment onto that device, just like you saw with the Windows 10 device. So it's all based on whether you're doing the app management or you're doing device management. So they give you different capabilities, but it also can open your device up to allowing the IT team to manage the device. So you go to, like we talked about, when you go into device management, if you let the IT, if you enroll your device in device management, the IT team has complete control of that device to actually wipe all your data. If you're doing photos and you have your music on there and other things on there. So that's why we look at both aspects of endpoint management, because device management is not a solution for everybody. And app management is not a solution for everybody. There's this whole gray area. And so that's why some people are doing device management, some people do app management, some people are doing both, device and app management. On the same line, so Exchange users, can you block the active sync for non-workspace endpoint management users? So if my device is enrolled, they will get Exchange active sync. If my device is not enrolled in the device management, they will not get device active sync. So yes, you can do this. It's just a matter of seeing if the active sync ID belongs to a user who's enrolled in the device management. And then we would then set up policies on the NetScaler. So this goes into more of the micro VPN route. So your on-prem NetScaler that would then allow or deny access for that particular user and their request. And it's all based on whether they have an active, whether that active sync ID relates to a enrolled user into device management. This is actually how Citrix does it. We have to, for part of this, we have to have our devices enrolled. We can't use the native applications on the mobile devices for email. So the iOS mail application, the Android mail application don't work for Citrix email for Citrix users. We have to use secure mail to get access to our email because they block that for using the native applications because of course it's company information. So if you leave the company, Citrix IT wants to be able to wipe your Citrix email off your device, which is probably a good thing. Content collaboration, is that the same thing as share a file? So I probably should have started this session talking about the name changes. I did in the last master class, the one in Q3. I didn't on this one, which my mistake. I probably should have done a refresh on that. So the names of the products changed. So now the product names are basically explaining what they do. So XenApp and XenDesktop, you had to go ahead and explain to people what XenApp and XenDesktop was. So now it's virtual apps and desktops. You had to explain what NetScaler was. Now we call it Gateway or we call it SD-WAN. The same thing went with Zen Mobile. I don't know what Zen Mobile is, so it's now Endpoint Management. And the same thing with ShareFile. Although ShareFile was actually a decent name because you're sharing files, but now it's called Content Collaboration because what you saw, it does more than sharing files. There's this whole collaboration piece that's part of what was ShareFile. The sending documents out, having people provide feedback, having people approve, just doing different content collaboration aspects on that. And I don't, but that might be the end of the questions, or the ones that I can answer. So I guess with that, I'd like to thank everyone for attending. And like I said, we're going to have another one of these in late Q1 of 2019. The plan is, like I said, the plan is to go over different authentication methods because honestly, username and password is not going to cut it. So we're going to take a look at TOTP, MFA, a couple other fun little acronyms when it comes to authentication. Hopefully we'll be taking a look at user layers, some of the content collaboration connectors, trying to plug into on-prem file shares, integrating with OneDrive, integrating with Box, Dropbox, other things like that. And then showing some interesting things on the Windows 10 endpoint management, like an autopilot, which is kind of neat. Having a Windows 10 device start up, automatically gets enrolled, all your applications are automatically deployed, and you're good to go. So it's kind of an interesting implementation that we'll be able to do and be able to show with the endpoint management in Q1. So looking forward to seeing a lot of you there, and have a great rest of the day and really a great rest of the year. Thank you.